up and says, no more. One person says, this is right, and this is the line in the sand. And that's what we're here for today. Because today is a day that makes a difference in our nation. Because what is happening here in this country is absolutely un-American.
Don't follow after the wicked ones or be jealous of their wealth. Don't think for a minute they're better off than you. They're not getting away with this, guys. They're really not going to get away with this. There's a God on the throne. They and their short-lived success will soon shrivel up and quickly fade away like grass clippings of the hot sun. Keep trusting in the Lord and do what is right. The vast majority of the public really doesn't realize this stuff happens. They have no clue, and I didn't either. Make sure you just go to the Health Impact News page or Medical Kidnap page. Hey guys, it is really exciting for me to be here. This is my old home area. I spent 5 years of my life at Toccoa Falls College. It was just, I did my 4 years and 5 years because I liked it so much up here. In Toccoa, Georgia, just about 20 minutes away from here. And I had no idea then about the legacy of Nancy Schaefer. Well, she hadn't even, when I was in college, this was before she had done her work. I had absolutely no idea about any of the things that I'm going to be talking to you about today. I want you to imagine with me, if you will, taking your child, taking your little one to the hospital because you notice that there's a bump on their leg or there's some kind of injury, some kind of minor injury, and you're going to be a good parent and you're going to take your child to the children's hospital because that's for children. That's where you take children that are hurt. You take them to the children's hospital. And imagine that this child that you've wanted for so long, that you love with every fiber of your being, this child that you would protect with your life, and you go in for a minor injury or some kind of injury, some kind of sickness, some kind of something. You don't really know what's wrong, but you're going to the experts at the hospital. You're going to the doctors who know how to fix this, who know how to deal with whatever's going on. And the next thing you know, you're being whisked out of the room. Social workers are coming in and talking to you. You've got police officers coming in and talking to you, and you're being told you can't take your child home. You're being accused of abuse, and your child is taken away from you, and you did nothing wrong. You took your child to the doctor because they had an injury or they were sick, and you're innocent. Well, surely that can't happen in America, is kind of the thinking that I always had. That's crazy. I remember hearing about the Justina Pelletier case in Boston a few years ago, about 4 years ago. And I remember thinking that that was an anomaly. That's the word I keep on using. It was an anomaly. This was one of those strange things that had happened, and it was a breakdown in the system. Something went terribly wrong for this young girl to be taken away from her parents and for her to be kept at Boston Children's Hospital. It was in October of 2014 that the editor of Health Impact News contacted me and said, hey, we are wanting to investigate stories of medical kidnapping. I had heard of all of 3 cases, including Justina's at that time, and I was interested in them. But the editor of Health Impact News asked me if I would be interested in investigating these stories because they were getting them coming in, lots of them coming in. And I said, sure, I would love to do this because I love truth. I love to dig and research, and I like to find out what's really going on. So I didn't come into this like so many of you precious, wonderful people who are here who got into this because you found out that it happened to you or somebody that you love. I got into this from a journalistic perspective, to investigate the stories, to see what was going on, to look at the evidence. And where the evidence led me has utterly horrified me, and it has completely changed my life. I'm no longer the same person that I was before I learned about this stuff. These pictures here These are just a few of the stories. They're not all of them by any means. In fact, we've got 3 parents here three families here today whose story we've covered with medical kidnap that aren't even, that we didn't put their picture on here. The belief is that this couldn't happen in America, and people don't want to believe that it can happen to you, because if it happens to you, then it could happen to me. And that's honestly part of the resistance that we see. I really believe that's part of the resistance that all of you have to people believing your story. Because if people acknowledge that it could happen to you, then they have to acknowledge that it could happen to them. And that knowledge is too frightening. It's too scary for us to even comprehend. In America, this is America. This isn't Nazi Germany. Well, let me tell you that there are actions that are being taken today across this nation in every state that are very much reminiscent of Nazi Germany and should never take place in America. I don't know law. I'm in awe of so many of the people that have spoken today about law and legalities and all of that. I know the Constitution. I read the Constitution, and it's really not that hard to understand. But beyond that, I don't have a legal mind. It doesn't make sense to me, and I'm just going to admit that to you. But I do know right from wrong. And I know that the creator of the universe gives children to parents to raise. He gives a little boy or a little girl to a mommy and a daddy to raise, to love, and we are charged. Children are a heritage from the Lord. And he gives them to those parents. He doesn't give them to the state. He doesn't give them to the government. He doesn't give them to animals. He gives them to parents. But yet we see a lot of what we've seen today is talking about social workers and attorneys and lawyers and all kinds of different entities coming in and false allegations and taking your children. But what we deal with every single day at Medical Kidnap is families whose children are taken because of what a doctor said. The Hippocratic Oath says, first do no harm. Well, let me tell you a little tiny bit about my background. I went to college over here. I majored in cultural anthropology and world missions. I was studying to be a missionary, and I felt like right after I got out of college that this whole big plan that I thought I was going to do and go be a missionary in some third world country and tell everybody about Jesus, that was not exactly where God was leading me. And it took me a long time to figure out what exactly he was leading me to do, which is this. But it's kind of been a circuitous route, but it's been preparation. I went back home to Birmingham, Alabama, met an amazing guy at church, and we got married, and he's a fireman, and we have 4 amazing kids. Thank God they're grown. Thank God they're grown. Thank God, because I'm scared, like many of you. I studied midwifery and childbirth. I was a breastfeeding educator. I was a childbirth educator. I was a labor doula and an assistant midwife. And I studied about bonding, attachment, parenting, that precious, intimate, sacred bond between a mother and her baby, a father and their child, that is something that no power on earth has the power to break. A baby gestates in the womb for 9 months, usually, sometimes less. But that baby, every cell in that baby knows mommy. Biological mommy, not adoptive mommy, not foster mommy. Biological mommy. They know their daddy's voice. When they're born, they know and they turn to daddy. They know their daddy's voice. There's a bond there. And you know, the Bible says what God has joined together, let no man put asunder. And we think of that usually as marriage. But I believe that that applies to parent and child. That is a bond on every level. Okay? So, with medical kidnapping, we deal with stories where children are taken from their parents for medical kinds of reasons. As I look at these posters, I can tell you I've cried many, 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 many tears for these families. I've looked at the evidence. I've looked at the medical records. I've looked at the court records. I've talked with relatives and family and people, and I've investigated and I've looked into their cases. I believe with every fiber of my being that every family story that we've covered at medicalkidnap.com is a case of an innocent parents who have lost their children. This shouldn't happen. Some of these children aren't with us anymore. One of the things that I learned, to my utter horror, is that children who are wards of the state, in other words, foster children, are legally able to be used as medical lab rats. They can be used for medical research, medical testing, drug testing, medical research. I learned very recently that if a child has cancer in the United States, if an adult has cancer, about 5% of them are in medical research studies, and they have a choice. They can choose whether or not they want to be a part of that medical research study, right? After the Holocaust and all the medical research that was done by companies like Bayer aspirin, and these companies that were literally requisitioning Jewish people for their medical research, the Nuremberg Code said, you know what? It's wrong to do medical testing on people without their consent, informed consent. So it is not only law in America, it is international law. It is unethical. It is wrong to do medical research on someone without their consent. Somehow, in the United States of America, we can bypass all of that because we take a child away from their parent and we have a social worker who's in charge or a guardian who is in charge. And you know what? That guardian or that social worker can give consent on your behalf for your child. A mother in January noticed a lump on her child's side. She went into an emergency room in the town where they were visiting, the city in Las Vegas. Went to the emergency room, and in no time flat, they had decided, okay, this is stage 4 Wilms tumor cancer, and we've got to take your baby's kidney. And the mom's like, oh, wait, back that truck up. What? Can we do some testing? Can we have a little bit of testing to confirm before you take a major organ out of my baby? Well, for her questioning medical authority, they took custody away from her. Let's see. Little girl right here. Oh, right here. Grace Beabout is her name. Right here. We haven't done the update story because the mother is gagged. They took her kidney last week. They took her kidney out. Why? I don't know. Let me tell you about Nariah. Same poster. This is a story I'm going to probably share every place I go. right here. Nariah is her name. I don't want you to ever forget Nariah's name or her face. Nariah, from here, she was here in Georgia. She was born in Pensacola, Florida. Lived there 8 years. She was born with a very rare medical condition called trisomy 9. It's rare. It's really rare. And some doctors really wanted to study her. But her mom said no. They moved to Atlanta, Georgia when she was 8 years old. And they took her to the doctor for a... They took her to the doctor just to get established with the new doctor. The doctor walks in the room. She picks up the chart. She doesn't look at the child. She picks up the chart and she says, "Ooh, I have some friends next door who would love to see you." So she had the mom admit the baby to her little girl to the hospital. And within a week, custody had been taken away from the mother. They made up false allegations that were easily proven wrong. Easily proven wrong, and they were proven wrong. Within a couple months, they had done a couple of surgeries, experimental, unnecessary surgeries. Went to see her in November. Went to see her with a couple of other advocates. She was full of life, and she had a beautiful smile. She was developmentally delayed. It was part of her trisomy. But she had a smile that would light up the room, and you knew that, you know what, if she had just some basic love and care, proper care, she'd be around for a while. Her mother has buried her. In effect, they killed her at this hospital. She was worth far more to them dead than she was alive. They wanted to study her. They took her away from her parents so that they could study her. You know, that's the kind of thing that is the subject of space alien movies. You know, E.T. You know, they protected E.T. because they didn't want people to be studying E.T. These are our children. These are our children. Children with rare medical conditions. I don't know how many times we've covered stories where a parent gets a diagnosis of something that's not quite so common, and they are at this hospital. It just happens to be starting to study a medical research study on that very same thing. Oh my, oh my, oh my, oh my. And they lose custody. And they're going, what did I do? It's a cry that I've heard from many of you. It's a cry that I hear all across America from parents who lose their children for whatever reason. And they say, what did I do? What did I do wrong? You know, the truth is you didn't do anything wrong. You didn't do anything wrong. There was a system out there who wanted your child. Your child was worth money to them. Your child was worth, a child could be worth millions of dollars to a medical research study. They get a kid and they just put them on the psychotropic drugs. We cover these kinds of stories. Another thing that we cover a lot is shaken baby syndrome. We cover things that are, we look at the science that is y'all are, a whole lot of y'all are about law. I am enjoying learning about the science of things. And shaken baby syndrome is one of those things. We've got the scientific medical knowledge that says, you know, if you see these three symptoms, brain hemorrhaging, retinal hemorrhaging, and brain swelling, then you know what? Shaken baby syndrome has occurred. And that's what they'll diagnose it as. But you know what? There's a whole lot of other things that could cause these same symptoms. Lots of other things. Lots of other things. You know, if you shake a baby and you're shaking them hard enough that you can cause their brain to bleed, and you can cause these symptoms, you would be hurting their neck, right? You know, I want you to take a guess. How many of the cases of shaken baby syndrome have neck injuries? Bingo! He got it right. None. None. No neck injuries. Is that even logical? I mean, I don't have to be a neuroscience, whatever, all the...
Science of rocketry.
Science, I don't have to be a rocket scientist to figure out that doesn't make sense. Okay. Multiple broken bones. And those are the ones the media does touch. Those are the ones you'll see on the news, the 5 o'clock news, and they'll say, this child was severely beaten because they've got 14 fractures. And they're always going to say numerous rib fractures in various stages of healing, and then some other fractures. That various stages of healing is like, okay, well, where's the osteogenesis imperfecta or the brittle bones condition, infantile rickets? What's the mother's vitamin D level like? Did she take antacids during pregnancy? Any of these things that can cause those same symptoms. Because in the cases that we deal with, there are not other things like bruising. There's not histories of violence or any of these other things that you would expect to go along with a child who had been horribly beaten. Now, I'm not saying that that kind of abuse doesn't exist, because it does. And we know that there are horrible parents that really have no business raising their kids because they're abusive. But you know what? They belong in jail. That's a criminal case where they belong in prison. And you know what? You know who should get that child? Their relatives. Grandma, aunt, uncle, somebody in their family. To think that we have over 400,000 foster children in the United States of America that don't have relatives that can take care of them, what are the chances of that? Really? Really? And I know it to be false, and we know that social workers will lie to the judge and say, Judge, we couldn't find any family that was suitable that could take care of this child. And it's a bold-faced lie, and we know that. So, and we also know social workers routinely lie. Those kinds of things. I want to talk about another thing. There's a book here where it's kind of crossed out, Medical Child Abuse. Written, these doctors literally wrote the book on medical child abuse. Have any of you ever heard of child abuse specialist? That term, child abuse specialist. Okay. A child abuse specialist is a doctor whose certification isn't in neurology or psychology or pediatrics or whatever it is. Their specialty is child abuse. And they started being board certified in 2010. So it's a fairly new profession. It's a fairly new division. However, children's hospitals routinely rely on them. You know, if you go to a neighborhood little hospital and then they say, well, we're going to send you to the big hospital, the big children's hospital in the big city, you better be on the phone with your lawyer. Because they're sending you to be evaluated by the child abuse specialist or the scan team or the Beacon Clinic. If you find yourself in a scan clinic or a Beacon Clinic, you are in the crosshairs. And if God didn't come and intervene, you're going to lose your child. I'm just going to tell you that. So, but medical child abuse is a term that these doctors have concocted that says that it's basically taking Munchausen by proxy and making it easier for them to pin that label on you. It is, in essence, what it is. Munchausen by proxy is a psychological condition where a parent, usually a mother, is like really crazy and does all kinds of insane things to their child to make them sick and make them have all these symptoms so that they can get attention. Well, that's what Munchausen by proxy really is, and it's really, 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 really rare. Okay, but it's being diagnosed a lot, an awful lot, and they'll call it medical child abuse. And here's what really happens. You want to know what really happens with these allegations of Munchausen by proxy or medical child abuse? You want to know what the real story is behind it? Because after covering tons and tons of these stories, I kind of know how this is going to work. A child has a surgery, or a child has a procedure, or a child has something going on at the hospital, or they're medically complex and the doctors aren't figuring out what's going on. And the mom or the dad or both say, you know, we want to get a second opinion. We want something. You've messed up here. There's some malpractice going on here. I'm going to talk to my lawyer because this is malpractice. Okay? You know what's fixing to happen? If you were at a hospital and you say, I'm fixing to talk to my lawyer because this is malpractice, within 24 hours, Child Protective Services will have your child. And you will be accused of Munchausen by proxy or medical child abuse. And when that happens, unlike a lot of other of the cases, usually visitation is cut off. Usually they don't allow visitation. It's a cover-up diagnosis. It's to cover up because if they have custody of your child, you can't sue them.